Hi students, welcome. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 16, which is Facilitating Speech, Language, and Communication Skills. Here are our objectives for Chapter 16. There are many. So remember, before you dive into the text, make sure that you read each of the objectives. Think about what you know about the objective, activating your prior knowledge, thinking about connections that we've made in this class and outside of class before you dive into the text, because this is going to help you retain the information much better because you are connecting your prior knowledge to new knowledge and you're clarifying misconceptions, you're elaborating on what you already know. So this is all part of information processing. So again, objectives first, think about what you know, and then read the chapter, and then we'll revisit the objectives at the end. So after reading this chapter, you should be able to define language and explain how it develops according to the theories discussed in the chapter. Describe the theories of language acquisition. Trace the sequence of language development from birth through age 5 or 6. Describe alternative language systems. Highlight the key features of a naturalistic language learning environment. Discuss speech irregularities among young children and describe appropriate responses from teachers and parents. And finally, discuss the similarities and differences of language development for single language speakers and English language learners. All right, so think about what you know about all of these different topics. Give you a moment to reflect. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. Defining speech, language, and communication skills. Communication is the exchange of thoughts and ideas, feelings, emotions, likes, and dislikes. So notice in this definition of communication, it does not specify speaking because we have lots of different types of communication that don't involve speaking, right? Communication is not the same thing necessarily as speech or language. So nonverbal communication are gestures and body language. So I might do this. What does that mean? Right? Or this, or hello, or this, or this, or this, right? So we have lots of different ways to communicate without using words, gestures, and body language. And then we also have printed word, which is written communication. So we see that every day. Print textbooks, obviously, menus, on our cell phones, we can read social media, we can read emails. So the written communication is all around us. Speech is the sound system of a language. So with language is the broader term. Speech would be a subcategory of language where sound is emitted, where sound is part of the communication process. It depends on the ability to make and produce a sound. Or I should reread that and emphasize the first part. It depends, it meaning the speech, it depends on the ability to make and produce sound. So verbal communication is speaking out loud to one another. Language is a code or symbol system that enables individuals to express ideas and communicate them to others who use the same code. So if you are speaking speaking Greek to someone else who speaks Greek, then you can communicate because you're using the same code. Whether it's the written Greek or the verbal Greek, you're speaking the same code so you can interpret and understand one another's messages and communication. Syntax is grammar, and semantics is word meaning. So these are some of the features of language. So syntax is the grammar. So if you notice in English, we would say the house is white. So we have the noun first, house, and then the describing word or the adjective is at the end of the sentence. That's the syntax, right? And so in other languages, for example, in Spanish, we would say what would we say in Spanish? We would say la casa blanca. So the house white versus the white house. So the word order is different. That's part of grammar. And then semantics is the word meaning. What do words mean? So the definitions of the words. Language acquisition, environmental perspective. The child will imitate spoken language, therefore learning to speak. So we have various theories about language acquisition. So this is just one approach. So the idea with the environmental perspective is that we learn language as children because our environment is filled with language. So we have caregivers interacting with us. And so we are, as children, we are imitating and modeling what we're hearing. And so we are developing language that way. Children from educated mothers hear more words and therefore are more able to use words to get what they want. So it's interesting because I recently read an article that was debunking this study that was done that said children from poor communities go to preschool knowing 3 million words less than children from more affluent communities. And I just read something on NPR that said that article was limited because it only studied 42 different families, and it had other limitations because it was racially biased. Also, if you think about a study being done, so if you're a family and you have a researcher coming in, sitting down and watching you and listening to you interact with your children, how natural is your interaction going to be? So in other words, it might be skewed because if I know I'm being evaluated with what kind of language I'm speaking to my children, then I might speak more to my children and I might use different vocabulary than I would normally use because I know that is what the researcher is looking for. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it was something that I just read, just food for thought to always think about looking at the research and the conditions of the study, the subjects used when you are, evaluating and making judgments based on research. There is something called infant-directed speech, also known as motherese. That's the high-pitched voice we talk to the young children. Hi, baby. How are you? Who's hungry? Do you want to eat? Wow, somebody's hungry. Ba, 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 ba. So I know it seems really silly and foolish, but when we're talking to a little person, we see their engagement, we see their eye contact, we see them emoting different feelings. And so it encourages adults to use this infant-directed speech or motherese because that is how we get feedback from the child, and the child gets feedback from us. When they smile, when they coo, when they babble, they notice that we reflect it back to them. So if a child babbles ba 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 and then the adult goes ba 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 ba, did you say you wanted baba? Baba, hi Baba, he said Baba. And so everyone gets excited and you're mimicking, you're imitating, or you're giving them something that you think represents Baba. And so it's reinforcing. They're getting all this reaction from making those sounds. And so it encourages them to continue making those sounds. It's pretty interesting. And this again is all under the environmental perspective of language acquisition. Infants' attention is maintained, exposing them to the language, the use of language, and encouraging attempts. So they're going to keep trying and making those attempts because they're getting that positive reinforcement or feedback from their caregiver. Now we have another perspective that's called innateness perspective. So think of the root of innateness is innate, something that's hereditary, you're born with it, it's inherent. So language unfolds as the child matures. Children are more likely to learn language if it holds meaning for them. So it's more contextually based. If it's functional language, it's getting your needs met. If you're expressing yourself, that would be the motivation for the language, according to the innateness perspective. Integrated explanation. So this is kind of a merging of the two, a hybrid. So the maturationally determined mechanism for learning language, the input or quality and timing of the child's early language experiences, and the use the child makes of input, the strategies the child devises for processing spoken language, and then reproducing it. So what is pre-linguistic communication? So before a baby learns what we consider language or spoken language, even not spoken language, because there are studies that show even children who have a hearing impairment and they're eventually going to learn to sign, they still go through pre-linguistic communication, crying, cooing, babbling, and intonation. So those are different signs of pre-linguistic communication: crying, cooing, babbling, and intonation. First words and sentences, we have vocabulary. They're practicing vowel and consonant combinations. Ma, 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 gi, 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 la, 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 da, 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 da. Those are all different sounds that children are going to start to make. Whether they start with vowel sounds, usually precede or come before consonant sounds. Receptive language, that's what you understand or comprehend. Understanding or recognizing of language. Expressive language, sending of language, speech, gesture, sign, etc. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean spoken. It can be through speech, but it could also mean gesture or signing, etc. So receptive language is essentially what the child understands. So even before a child is pre-verbal, I might say, smile, smile at mama, and then the baby smiles, right? You might tell a child, pick up your toys. You know, an 18-month-old who maybe doesn't know how to say that, but they understand when you say pick up your toys, they understand what that means. And then expressive language is the child's ability to express themselves through speech, gesture, sign, etc. Early sentences, syntax, that is how words are put together. So that's what we were talking about in the previous slide with the house is white versus La Casa Blanca, the White House. So the order of words, how words are put together. Holophrastic speech, single words to convey an entire thought. So, for example, if a child says dada, that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean daddy's home. It can mean I love daddy. It can mean where's daddy, right? So in that one little phrase, there is implied meaning. Or if a little child goes up, right? That probably means pick me up, or I want to go up, or the balloon went up, right? Even with that one little phrase or word, there is an entire thought that's conveyed. Telegraphic speech, simple 2-word sentences like no go. No go. I don't want to go, or I don't want you to go. And oftentimes when we're working with children or we have our own children, we start to understand what these 2-word sentences mean, right? In context. More milk. I would like some more milk. More milk. Private speech helps direct behavior, right? So private speech would be speech that's done in a way that is individualized for the child, and that helps direct behavior. Then we also have language complexity, so the use of W questions, which would be like your why questions. Transforming positives to negatives, indicating more than one, conveying ownership, over-regularization, grammatical misconstruction. So when children are learning language, they overgeneralize or overregulate different grammar rules. So if somebody said, you know, I looked it at her, right? Because a lot of words in the English language end with the hard ED sound, right? So they're overgeneralizing. Right? Or adding S to everything that's plural. So when we say I have one book, I have 2 books, right? So something like fish, they might say I have 2 fishes, right? Even though technically, I think now in the English language, both are actually acceptable, fish and fishes, but in general, we would say fish can stand for plural, or sheep. Sheep means more than one sheep. So a child might say, I saw 3 sheeps at the farm. So they're overgeneralizing these rules and it makes sense that they would do that. Nonverbal communication. Adults should respond to the body language while giving the child the words to say. Augmentative communication systems. So this would be the AAT that we talk about in this course. Use of gestures, signs, symbols, or pictures to communicate with others. And then we have voice synthesizers, and we have picture exchange communication system. Signing. Observe and see what signs are already in place. Teach simple signs. A lot of children who maybe have, parents who expose their children to baby sign language, for example, know things like more, milk, right? All done. So teaching simple signs. Move slowly, picking a child's favorites to sign. Speak and act naturally when signing. So now we're going to move to the naturalistic language learning environment. Arranging a language learning environment. Teachers can arrange the environment so that all children can talk. So making sure that all children are all visible, can see each other. The teacher can see all the children so that they can talk to one another. And then teachers make sure that there are things to talk about. I would recommend basing that on children's interests. So starting with what the children are interested in and what they're engaged in, to come up with topics to discuss. Let the children drive the conversation. The teacher's expectations. Children should have a reason to communicate. Children should be given time to share their ideas. Teachers and children need to become good listeners and alert responders. I think these are some good tips. The role of questions. Questioning is so important. I would say from birth all the way through end of life. The asking of questions and being inquisitive and allowing learners to ask open-ended questions. Provide a role model for how to answer questions, language play and practice, and information gathering. Activities for a naturalistic language environment. Provide materials that are new and unique. Provide field trips, life experiences, picture books, songs, rhymes, chants, new vocabulary, wordplay, active playtime. Direct assistance. Choice making, man modeling. Man modeling would be like demanding. The textbook gives an example if the child finding something that the child is interested in. So maybe I'm holding up a toy car and I ask the child to say what he or she wants. And if they say boat, I would say, this is a car, now you say car. So you're giving them prompts to encourage accurate speech. Then we have topic continuation, time delay, and incidental teaching. Milieu teaching. This is where the child initiates communication. The teacher needs to make sure that the initiation by the child continues by being readily available, showing interest in the child's questions, prompting a response, being conscious of keeping contact brief, and making sure the contacts are pleasant. There are some speech irregularities. Now I'm having a problem with my speech. Speech irregularities. Articulation area. So articulation is the clarity of pronunciation. So some children experience articulation errors like omissions, leaving out sounds, or substitutions, interchanging sounds. And that's a popular one with children. Even typically developing children might substitute sounds. So instead of dog, it might be dod, D-O-D. Additions, inserting sounds that are not part of the word, and distortions, deviations in speech sounds. Also lisping. Lisping usually goes away on its own unless adults encourage it by commenting on it. So sometimes it invokes anxiety, and that goes with stuttering as well. Disfluency, stuttering that does not correct itself. Guidelines for speech irregularities. Make sure that the child is well rested. Provide comfort and care. Reduce tension. Have fun with language. Discipline with calmness. Offer activities where a child can be successful. And that's really important. You want to give the child opportunities to feel successful. Do not correct or nag a child. Call attention to the speech irregularities. Do not hurry a child or compare a child's speech to another. Attempt to change a child's handedness, and that would be right-handedness or left-handedness. The brain determines the brain dominance, whichever hemisphere is dominant. So if you're left brain dominant, typically you're right-handed, and if you're right brain dominant, typically you're left-handed. I'm a lefty, and I like to say that's why all left-handed people are in our right minds, because we are right brain dominant. Just a silly left-handed joke there for you. Sorry for all you right-handed people out there. All right, so when is it time to give a referral for speech therapy? So here are some early warning signs. Watch for severe delays in talking. Watch for disfluencies. Watch for the child to become withdrawn from social activities that require speech. When in doubt, refer to a specialist for further testing. And I think that's important too. If you're not sure, it's better to err on the side of having testing done versus waiting when the child could be getting early intervention services. So for intervention, one-on-one therapy is best. Teachers, specialists, and parents need to work collaboratively in conjunction with one another, communicating with one another. The more repetition and practice the child has, the better the therapy will work. Wow, I should send this slide to the folks in my son's last IEP. I feel like that would have been very, very helpful, very straightforward. The research says yes. And for English language learners, so that's for children for whom English is not the first language, so they're learning English as a second language. They have another language that is their primary language. Children should not be forced to give up their native language, right? We should encourage children to speak in their language of origin. Children should not be labeled language impaired because of a language deficiency, and I think that's unfortunate. We should look at multiple languages or a child being multilingual as an asset. And it's unfortunate that in some places that is considered a deficit. Oh, the child is, not proficient in English. Oh, wow, this is going to be challenging. No, it's amazing that a child is coming with more than one language. That's a wonderful asset, which unfortunately a lot of us don't have. I wish that I was multilingual. So I think that's an amazing thing. And it's such a benefit to grow up speaking multiple languages. Children should be offered opportunities to practice the new language in a relaxed play setting. So we've gone through chapter 16. Now let's go back and revisit our objectives from the beginning. So now that you've read the chapter, hopefully now you are able to define language and explain how it develops according to the theories discussed in the chapter. Describe the theories of language acquisition. Trace the sequence of language development from birth through age 5 or 6. Describe alternative language systems. Highlight the key features of a naturalistic language learning environment. Discuss speech irregularities among young children and describe appropriate responses from teachers and parents. Discuss the similarities and differences of language development for single language speakers and English language learners, also known as ELL. So those are objectives revisited. Hopefully, now that we've gone through the chapter and you've reviewed your notes, maybe reread some areas in the textbook that you were a little unsure of, and now you are able to speak to these objectives a little bit more thoroughly. So thanks again for listening. Hopefully this has been helpful. I will see you next time.